them, their context, because their words carry, as they say, a lifetime of meaning. Remember we had that phrase from somebody whose mother was a poet. Every word carries a lifetime of meaning, so to understand what they're meaning by whatever they use the words, action research, or it's to understand that you need to have something about them. So that's what I wanted to try and just say a little bit more about, even giving these as stories rather than evolving your understandings. It's not a case of understanding evolution as though it was an objective entity. But if you're going to actually create that understanding, you need to have some idea of what they're doing, which then brings you, I wanted to perhaps finish the paper with an invitation to them as to how they're going to create and evolve their understandings as a living history that is part of this movement that actually goes beyond, rather than being constrained within that world. So it's placed within the living boundary between themselves. Librarianship. We're also looking at other worlds that are all there, but you need to be aware of them. And within that boundary, then you're not imposing, but you're offering. So that's where I was starting to go. So if you've got anything that would help me in that future, please send me any references or
I have to be honest and say I only really fully understood some of that.
It's because what is it you said? What the hell's going on in my head? You said pages.
Because you might say that's what I've just said, so sorry if I've missed. But are you going to tell your story? Because some of the most powerful ways of, I think, well, don't know whether people receive it or not, is to actually tell your own story. And so, are you going to tell your story of the bits from history that fit? Can you do that?
Yeah. Okay. Yes, I'll see how it weaves in, because it's obviously there.
Because there's some things really resonate for you, when they might for other people perhaps, but they collect, they resonate because there's a whole lot of other things that resonate as well.
Yes, I can see where I've just alluded to that, and not actually gone into the sort of detail it might be right.
Sonia just talked about images of monkeys coming up. The image that came up in my mind when you were talking about living boundaries was the collision of atoms in the Large Hadron Collider. And actually worlds colliding and unbelievable amounts of energy and strange particles appearing out of that, which are completely new. And then they somehow, world and life just goes off in a new direction. And then that collides with something else.
It's interesting how the metaphors actually create different things, because that idea, a notion of living boundaries, I like the idea of like a boundary. I had this image of a soap bubble, because there's a clear boundary between the world of within the bubble and the world without. But the more you look into that boundary, the more it's actually a really living space. So if you explode it, things are lost. And then if people are resisting that explosion, they get solidified. So it's rather than how do they bring together in conflict, but how do you actually bring them together so that within that boundary there's something created, and that idea, that tension within, which is what holds the bubble together. It's not a destructive tension, it's a creative tension. So again, it's the metaphors as well, and the images. So what's in my mind, I've got all those, I can never represent that picture, which in answer to your question you asked me years ago, what else in your head? That's my frustration, I can't get that to actually communicate.
Marie, the image I always had, Marie, the inside of your head was this kind of like, almost like kind of marshy, soupy sort of thing. You know, one of those, or in the hot springs, you know, kind of with things coming out like this, and so there'll be a plop here and a plop here, and something going, and it's constantly going like this, but then you kind of I haven't ever quite got to the bit underneath where they all come from. Do you know what I mean? So it's kind of a lot of different bits of activity, kind of like this, and somewhere underneath there's a bit that holds it all together, and I don't know where. I'm not sure that I've ever heard the bit that holds it all together that's underneath. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's your image that's the best
No. I just could I just check something? It's lovely that Nigel has actually got that on video. Yeah? Because I don't know if you've seen Billy Connolly's audience. Have you seen the audience with Billy Connolly? Because I think Marie's really learnt a lot from Billy Connolly. The last one I saw yesterday, and he comes on the stage and he says, "And I start very slowly." Now, it wasn't a transformation. Yeah? Now, I think Nigel will have got that transformation.
Yeah.
When you tap me, yeah? Now, I'm wondering whether Andy might be able to help us to get that sense of the artist, because something was transformatory in what I think we heard. Anyway, there's something I think really powerful there with that body language that you noticed.
I also felt a collective.
Well, doesn't it go for? Yeah. So I think you've got something really important there. Nigel, so could you perhaps share that?
Absolutely.
Oh, that's great.